ठीक है, चल देखता हूँ। कल एक बार देख के रखे। ओके, बाय बाय। हेलो। Okay, very good evening, boys and girls. Am I audible to all of you? Okay, so good evening, boys and girls. This is Aumkar Gadgil, Chartered Accountant. Friends, this in the particular initiative that I have undertaken from today on the occasion of completion of 11 years of being a chartered accountant. So what the plan is under this, what the plan is like, I will be trying to cover all the all the chapters of the CA intermediate as well as CA final syllabus for GST, right? Okay, I guess you can just ignore the technical snag in between. So the plan is, friends, that what I'll be doing is that every day, 1 hour, I'll be taking this lecture for GST, and we will go in a sequence. There are notes which are available. So once you are reaching out to me on the email ID, so just I need to know the authenticity of the person to whom I'm sharing the notes with, and I'll share very much happily the PDF file of the notes which I have prepared for the CA or the CA final level. I wish to first, clarify a few things that ever since that I put up this entire initiative drive that I had put up on my social media accounts, and a lot of quite a few cases I have noted that people have questioned whether this is an initiative by the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, since I am serving as a secretary of the Thane branch. I would just like to clarify that this initiative has been taken up by me in my individual capacity. ICAI per se has got no direct or indirect connection with this initiative. The reason I'm clarifying my position is because there are certain questions raised that whether I'm doing this under the name of ICAI just to get some, name and fame so that I can start my own classes in future and all. So, friends, I would just like to clarify that from 2012 to 2023 January, I have been teaching in classes for almost these 10 and a half years. I have taught many students of CA, CS, and ICWA. And somehow now, considering the involvement that is required in practice, I have decided to not pursue. I've decided to not pursue the teaching career per se on a professional front, and that's why this entire thing is purely for for the genuine common purpose of all the students. So I just wanted to clarify this, since in the morning I was getting a lot of, quite a few messages that what is the motive behind this? Are you going to open the class? You are circulating in institute related groups. So I have just clarified my position. So friends, I understand that there might be some students who are appearing for CA intermediate, CA final, and both may be online right now. That's perfectly fine. Now there is the common part of the syllabus, and that's why I have purposefully kept it as a CA intermediate as well as CA final lecture. There will be a point in time when the CA intermediate related topics will be over, and that time we are going to depart. There will be times when the common topics wherein CA final student needs more emphasis or more time with that topic. I will also tell on those particular days that okay, today only the CA final students can join in, and maybe not the CA intermediate. But at least for the initial few lectures, there is no distinction. You may be of any level, that is intermediate or final, the lectures are going to be useful for you. So basis that we are taking up this is why I wanted to tell you. So now friends, we'll start with the first chapter of discussion for the GST syllabus. And as I said that I wanted to keep the class on a brief side. That is, I wanted to keep it only for a part of 1 hour every day for two reasons, of course, because I also may or may not find time for taking an extensive 3 hours lecture. Even for the students who are appearing for the November attempt, I'm sure that by the end of September at least, I mean, in a fair proportion, we should be able to finish up with the discussion of all the envisaged chapters that we are trying to cover. And therefore, I am in no rush, but I am not taking up anything per se in the form of this. On the other side, if you have any doubts during the lectures, I've also posted a Zoom link because the YouTube live streams happens 20 to 25 seconds after the Zoom recording happens over here. So if there are any other questions that you would want to ask, you may directly join in on the Zoom link so that I can get it on a one-to-one chat box. That is just what I wanted to put across. So all these lectures will be, of course, they will be saved on YouTube, on the YouTube channel of mine. And therefore, even though you may or may not be having time when I'm continuing with the lecture, we can definitely, you can definitely reach out to me for the doubts later also, but then you can just bring it across. Like I said, that the purpose being teaching the subject, and therefore there are two things what I do. I rather only humbly wish to state that I do not teach on the basis of a select few questions or any of the categorized materialized notes. My intent is that since it is a law-based subject, you as a student of chartered accountancy are expected to know the law very properly, the law very thoroughly. So as much as possible, we are going to focus briefly on all the concepts. We'll go through the question and answers that I have taken out for every chapter. Over and above that, if there are any questions from the ICI module or any other study material you would want to discuss, you can please really put across the same to me. I'll be happy to help you there. So this will be stretched as a part of 1 hour every lecture. So even if you are planning, I mean, even if you are doing I mean, on your study leave right now, and if you want to, every day join in, so 7:30 to 8:30, this would be the ideal time for us to, discuss this. Now, only for tomorrow, there will be a challenge that 7:30 to 8:30 because I'm traveling tomorrow as well as on Saturday. And wherever I'm traveling, the only difference that I'll make is that I will ensure that 1 hour lecture is taken every day, but I will take it maybe in the later part of the day or in the earlier part of the day, but I'll have it published on the YouTube channel. So you can still access that the sequence doesn't get broken. That is my precise intention. Okay, friends. So basis that, now how we are going to proceed. So the notes which I have are the Bare Act based notes. So the reason being that GST law is very simply drafted and put across. So the Bare Act is the basis always. So Bare Act notes, we will go through the section provisions. We are going to discuss the practical application of that. We will discuss a few examples and illustrations. And then at the end of it, we'll discuss the question and answers from that chapter, from ICA study material as well as from any other study material, and more importantly, the questions that we have for it. Usually, I'll try to communicate in English and Hindi. Okay, that is precisely I prefer to speak more in English, but जहाँ पे भी possible है, relevant है, I'll also not like shy away from using Hindi as a language because वो भी relatively easy है समझना. All right, friends. So let us start. If you have any questions, you can put across. Else, I would just start discussing the first chapter. All right. So the first chapter, I mean, the first thing that we are going to discuss from GST right now is that firstly, the basics of the indirect taxes is what I would like to cover in a span of just 1 or 2 minutes. Friends, what happens is that in the stream of taxation, now the CA final students obviously must be very much aware that what direct and indirect taxes is, but there are some students who are from CA intermediate class, and therefore we just need to spend a couple of minutes to understand the basic distinction between the taxes of direct and indirect nature. So as far as the direct taxes are concerned, the taxes which are directly leviable and directly charged on your income, on the person's income, are called as direct taxes. The taxes which will be ordinarily levied on the indirectly are going to harm your earning ability or indirectly going to harm your savings ability. Those taxes are usually called as indirect taxes. So now if I would want to give you an example, so when you're earning a professional fee, so let's suppose that I earn a professional fees from one of my client. So while paying me that professional fees, he deducts the tax at the source, at the very source from which I'm generating the income, my tax gets deducted. So that tax will be called as a direct tax because that is directly causing an impact on my earnings or impact on my earning ability. Whereas indirect taxes, so the money which I get, now I'm going to use that money to spend for myself. Maybe I'm going to pay my bills. Maybe I'm going to go to a restaurant. Maybe I'm going to go and pay my telephone bill, my Ola cab bills, etc., etc. Or maybe I make some capital purchase, like buy a phone, I buy a laptop, something like that. In such case, when I make these spendings on these amounts that I spend for these services or these goods that I buy, over and above the value of these services or the value of goods, I additionally end up paying certain amount of tax. That tax will indirectly impact my savings ability, and therefore that is one of the reason why it is also called as an indirect taxes. So it's called as an indirect impact or an indirect impact on my saving ability. So the taxes which directly affect my income are direct taxes. The taxes which indirectly impact my savings ability are precisely the indirect taxes. Now, friends, when you talk about indirect taxes, the indirect taxes system in India started back when you had in the year, let's for that instance, in the year 1944, you had the Central Excise Act, which was there earlier. Now it has got repealed from 1st July 2017. Thereafter, you had the Customs Act, which is still existing as on today because customs did not get subsumed in the GST regime. Then you had the Central Sales Tax Act. Then you had the state VAT laws, the service tax provisions. Prior to the state VAT laws, there were the service tax provisions introduced. And so the journey of indirect taxes right from 1944 till 2017 was carrying multiple type of taxes, namely central excise duty was levied on manufacture of goods. The sales tax, the central sales tax was levied on the interstate sale of goods. The state VAT was levied on the intrastate, that is within the state sale of goods. The sale of, beg your pardon, the provision of services के ऊपर there was a service tax applicable. And on the activity of, say, there was certain tax called as a local body tax. There was a octroi. Now all these tax got subsumed, that is they were clubbed together under the common tax connotation that is called as the GST, that is the goods and service tax. So from 1st July 2017, the taxation structure changed, and we had this GST structure being brought in place. And also today we have a tax called as the customs duty again, which is over and which is other than the subsumed taxes under GST. So customs duty is very distinctly, vividly available, and it is still applicable. Now, friends, if you ask me that as far as these taxes are concerned, so how do we really take into consideration that what exactly is going to be, or rather, what is the point on which the taxes get levied? Okay, so for instance, okay, just 1 minute, there's a lag for the whiteboard. Okay. Now, friends, as far as this aspect of tax is concerned, one very important point that you need to remember is that tax is always levied on some taxable event. Tax is always levied on some taxable event. Now, this is very important to understand that कोई भी tax levy करने के लिए क्या जरूरी है, that there has to be some taxable event. Now, what do you mean by a taxable event? So only on happening of this taxable event, there will be a tax which can be levied ever. So now what can be the taxable event? So for instance, when I talk from the point of view, now we spoke about income tax, right? हम लोग ने बोला income tax के बारे में. So for the purpose of income tax, what is the taxable income? The taxable event, earning of income. Earning of income is a taxable event for income tax. Now, why earning of income is a taxable event for income tax? Because unless there is an earning of income tax will never get attracted. So now, देखो, income tax के बारे में simple है that a person may be very wealthy because his forefathers have a huge amount of wealth for him. उसके पास बहुत सारे बंगला गाड़ी सब कुछ है. Okay, he has, एक बंदे के पास सब कुछ है, बंगला गाड़ी सब कुछ पड़ा हुआ है. He has immense wealth, he has immense money. But during the financial year, say 23-24, he has earned 0 rupees. He has earned 0 rupees. So when I say that during FY23-24, he earned 0 rupees, but his wealth is of rupees, say 100 crores. So now the question is that if this is the factual scenario, can we say that for financial year 23-24, this guy is going to pay any income tax? Now the answer is negative. The answer is negative. Why? Because for levy of direct tax, for levy of income tax, what was relevant to happen? Taxable event. Now, during the year 23-24, was there any taxable event that happened? There was no taxable event. So, what we are going to say, during the year 23-24, there was no earning there was no earning of income. तो मैंने आपको सिर्फ बोला उसके पास वेल्थ है, सो इग्नोर दैट, उसको कोई इंटरेस्ट इनकम मिलता है वगैरह नहीं, उसके पास 100 करोड़ का प्रॉपर्टी उसके नाम पे है, पर he has not earned anything during 23-24. So what we are going to say, during the year 23-24 there was no earning of income. So for the year 23-24 there will be, for the year 23-24 there will be no income tax payable. There will be no income tax payable. Now why so? Why so? Simple reason being that no taxable event, then no taxable event equals to, will equal to no levy of tax. Now ये तो हमारा बात हुआ from the point of view of income tax, that if there is no taxable event there will be no income tax. Simple. Okay, just 1 minute please. Okay, sorry for the technical snack. Now, the next part of it. Now, when you talk from the point of view of goods and services tax. So, goods and services tax ke liye, again, as I said, that unless there is some other, some or the other taxable event, there will be no tax. Now, for GST, for the levy of GST, merely goods and services ka hona is not sufficient. Merely goods and services ka hona is not complete. What is more relevant is that for goods and services, unless you do not have the taxable event, there will be no GST that can be levied. And therefore, very importantly for us, what is relevant to understand, if you do not have any taxable event which is applicable for GST, if you do not have any taxable event for GST, there will be no GST that can be levied for a transaction. So now let us try to understand what is a taxable event for the purpose of GST. Supply of goods or supply of services. Now, ये supply जो word है, ये first of all, like it came into really the discussion points when GST came in. So we will just keep it simple for the while. Okay, we'll just keep it simple for the while. What do you mean by supply? So abhi, for example, supply of goods. So supply का एक बहुत बड़ा inclusive definition meaning दिया हुआ है. We'll go to that when we refer to the provisions of section 7, scope of supply under the CGST Act. But we will first just have a basic idea. For instance, say sale of goods. Now sale of goods में जो sale है वो sale is nothing but a transaction of supply by way of sale. Now sale of goods में I am saying that when there is a sale of goods, there is क्या होता है when there is a sale of goods, that there is a transfer of ownership in the goods. There is a transfer of ownership in the goods. That is to say that whomsoever is the owner of the, whomsoever was the owner of the goods, he is going to transfer the ownership of the goods to the buyer. Transfer of ownership, तो आपने जब Sale of Goods Act पढ़ा था, that time you must have studied that. It means there is a transfer of risk and rewards along with that. There is a transfer of risk and rewards along with that, right? So when I say that there is a supply of goods, then we say that there is a taxable event which has taken place, because for the levy of GST, what is essential? That there has to be some taxable event. Now, likewise, if I say that, okay, there is we are going to talk about some transaction of, let's say, we are going to talk about a transaction of, say, sale of services. sale of services. So now, simple point we'll take into consideration. Let's say that I've taken a Zoom subscription now, and for this lectures, I've taken a Zoom subscription, which has costed me somewhere around 1,200 rupees for the month. Now, these Zoom subscription that I've taken, so Zoom as a platform is allowing me to use their platform, and they are also allowing me to stream it on YouTube. See, so now what is happening over here? There is a supply of services by Zoom to Aumkar, as Zoom is allowing Aumkar to use their platform for a consideration. Zoom is allowing to use their platform for a consideration. Right? Zoom is allowing their platform to be used for a consideration. So here what is happening, that there is a supply of service that is happening. There is a supply of service that is happening because Zoom is permitting me to use their platform for the purpose of supply of services. So there is a sale of service which is happening. Again, what it means, that there is some taxable event that is happening. Now, what is that taxable event over here? That Zoom allowing me to use their platform is a taxable event. That's a supply of service. Now, the moot point being here, that whenever there will be a supply of goods or whenever there will be a supply of services, these will be considered as taxable events for the purpose of GST. These will be considered as a taxable event for the purpose of GST. And once there is a taxable event, there will be a tax which will get levied. This becomes like a constant factor. Once there will be a taxable event, it will be considered as a transaction liable to tax. So we have not yet gone to the levy aspect of GST. Try to understand. We are just right now focusing on the very basics of it. What are the basics of it? We are just trying to say that whenever there will be a GST, I mean, whenever there is any tax levied, whether it is direct tax or there is an indirect tax, there will always be something called as a taxable event. Okay, there will always be something called as taxable event. Unless there is a taxable event, there will never be a tax. So this is our fundamental point of learning in this case. Now, we'll go a step further now and discuss that what exactly then indirect tax system today is, as far as the transactions in India are concerned. What are the indirect tax? I mean, how is the indirect tax system really set up as on today? So we have the indirect tax system in such a way. Okay, we have the indirect tax system in such a way that primarily the law has been divided into, primarily the law has been divided on what basis? So for import and export of goods, we still have the Customs Act 1962 in force, and it has continued to be there prior to GST also and after GST also. So if today we take into consideration which are the taxes which are really applicable from an indirect tax point of view. So firstly, the Customs Act very much exists. There is no subsuming of any customs taxes under the GST regime. Customs has very much existed prior to GST also, and custom exists even today. So today what do we have, friends, that in our indirect tax system, indirect tax structure today, आज हम लोग broadly देखेंगे तो this is where we are placed. Okay, as far as indirect taxes are concerned, I have two particular parts to it. First, as far as import of goods, and as far as export of goods is concerned, these two transactions will be solely dealt with. These two transactions will be solely dealt under the Customs Act 1962. They'll be dealt with the along with the as under the Customs Act 1962 very clearly. And if there are any transactions of now that word particularly which has been coined under the GST law, supply of goods or supply of services, or I'll further extend it to import of services and export of services. Now, because we have talked about import of goods and import of goods and export of goods, so specifically I had just mentioned over here that when it comes to import of services and export of services, the relevant law which you are going to refer is going to be the goods and services tax. Okay, whenever you're going to refer to this, it will always be the goods and services tax. So import of goods, import of service and export of service है तो customs law में नहीं जाना है. What we are going to refer is GST law. Whenever there is something called as supply of goods and supply of services, what we are going to go to is not the customs law, but then it will be always the goods and service tax laws. All right. So I hope that this aspect is very clear that what the fundamental or where the fundamentals are really lying. Okay, now I'm just giving a heads up that those who are watching the YouTube live stream, if you have the link available in the chat box, kindly connect to the Zoom so that you can get to have the real-time discussion. Zoom to YouTube, it lags at around 20 seconds time. So maybe if this is helpful to you, you can join in at the Zoom link that has been provided. Now, we'll go further. So of course, in GST law, there might be some things which will be there in your mind. Okay, sir, when we are like going to the restaurants, we are seeing that there are CGST and SGST, two taxes levied on some bills. Sometimes we see there is a GST, there is a IGST which is levied, right? So what we are going to understand that ये जो अलग-अलग GST नाम से है, so namely you have under the GST laws, you have something called as that you might have heard of till now is, okay, so you must be having something called as CGST Act, SGST Act, IGST Act, UTGST Act, and GST Compensation Cess Act. Now, so if you remember, when GST was introduced, what was that? What rather is still the tagline of GST law? GST जब इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था तब से आज तक GST लॉ का टैगलाइन क्या है? It's a one nation, one tax. Now this sounds a bit funny. That सर इधर तो आप बोलते हो वन नेशन वन टैक्स, बट यू ऑलरेडी स्टेटेड CGST, SGST, IGST, UTGST, and also the GST compensation cess. So friends, try to understand that this structure of GST law is, yes, 100% is one nation, one tax. There are the acts which have been made in such a manner that the administration of the centrally collected tax, the state collected taxes, and the centrally collected taxes for interstate transactions and the transactions which are taking place within a union territory, for all these collections of taxes under different scenarios, and also administrative controls and powers to be given to central authorities or state authorities or the union territory authorities, who again are coming under the central. And there are certain rules and regulations and the law provisions which are envisaged in the IGST Act. Put together this combination of tax taxes, rather the combination of these acts are really available for you. So it is not that कि one nation one tax है तो actually सिर्फ GST नाम से बस बोल देना चाहिए, मतलब it would have been rather very simple. But because remember, we have moved from a scenario of origin based taxation system to destination based taxes system. So origin based tax system means in the pre-GST regime, if the goods were sold from the state of, let's say, Maharashtra to Gujarat, प्री जीएसटी, मतलब मैं 1 जुलाई 2017 के पहले की बात कर रहा हूँ. In that case, if the goods were sold from Maharashtra to Gujarat, let's suppose, then it was the government of Maharashtra who used to earn the revenue when the goods were sold from Maharashtra and delivered it to Gujarat. Because so origin based taxation system, जहां से transaction originate होता था उस state को उसका revenue मिलता था. However, under the GST laws, it is a destination based tax system. Means today when the goods are sold, let's say from Tamil Nadu to Bihar, then instead of Tamil Nadu, it is the Bihar state where the consumption of the goods is taking place, and therefore the Bihar state is going to get the tax revenue of that amount, of that tax. Now, friends, because of these reasons, the taxes and the transactions which have been made in such a manner, because of these reasons, we have these taxes which are formed in these particular manner. And therefore, for us, it is relevant to understand, it is relevant to know that every tax which is levied, rather under the CGST Act, so CGST Act will always depict the central portion from the intrastate supply transactions. The UTGST, beg your pardon, which is collected will also represent the central levy collection portion. That is what is going to be going to the central government. The SGST represents the share of revenue of the state government where the supply is taking place, where the consumption is taking place. The IGST represents the integrated tax, means when it is an interstate transaction, interstate supply transaction. Of course, we are going to come to that, what each type of transaction means. But for the while, just try to understand that even though GST is a one nation, one tax, you still have these multiple acts which have been introduced for the various reasons which are associated along with it. So I hope that this primary basic aspect of why do you have CGST, SGST, IGST, UTGST, and yes, GST compensation says something that we have not talked about. Now, this GST compensation cess in particular is nothing but a compensatory cess amount which is given to those states who are going to suffer a loss because of the introduction of GST. Now, friends, like I told you that origin based taxation system से we move to which one? Destination based taxation system. तो पहले ऐसा होता था कि जिन स्टेट से सेल जनरेट होता था वो स्टेट्स को रेवेन्यू ज्यादा मिलता था एज अगेंस्ट जहां पे कंजम्पशन हो रहा है. सो लेट्स से दैट अर्लियर तमिलनाडु से बिहार अगर गुड्स जाते थे तो तमिलनाडु को उसका टैक्स मिलता था. अगर उत्तर प्रदेश से सपोज गुड्स जाते थे कर्नाटका में तो उत्तर प्रदेश को उसका रेवेन्यू मिलता था. But because GST is a destination based consumption tax, now in today's day, if the goods are going from Tamil Nadu to Bihar, it is the Bihar government which is going to be considered as a consuming state government, and वहां पे consumption of goods हो रहा है. So wherever the destination of consumption is, that state will get the share of revenue. But every state will have to share the share of revenue with who? With the center. So whenever there is a transaction taking place of interstate supply, that is from one state to another, whichever is a consuming recipient state, उनको उसका revenue का share मिलेगा along with the central government. Whenever there is a transaction within the state, again there will always be a portion of tax which will be collected by the central government, and there will be a portion of tax which will be given to the state government. Inside a union territory also, there will be something which is going to go to the union territory, that is the UTGST, as well as the portion of CGST, that is the Central Goods and Services Tax, which will go to the central government, and UTGST will go to that union territory revenues. And like I said, in case of IGST, it will go in such a form that the IGST revenue will be distributed to the central government and to that state where the consumption is taking place. Now ये GST compensation says फिर क्यों लाया गया? That even though there is a structure which is very clearly laid down under the GST law that कौन किसका revenue distribute करेगा, when we changed the taxation system from the pre-GST regime to the GST regime, the only change that happened was that हमारा origin-based taxation system got converted into the destination-based taxation system. And because we changed from the origin based taxation system to the destination based taxation system, what really differed was those states which were getting the revenues earlier on the basis of sales from their state now suddenly lost the trap. They suddenly lost the plot. And therefore, for all the states जिनके लिए ये origin based tax हट जाने के वजह से जो नुकसान हुआ है वो भरने के लिए we introduced GST compensation cess. The GST compensation cess is levied on multiple things. Multiple things as in it will be levied on the GST compensation will be levied on some select goods like motor vehicles, like soft drinks. So these are some goods जिसको selectively जिसके ऊपर GST compensation cess levy किया जाता है. Coal for instance. This GST compensation cess is collected by the central government and given to those states who have suffered the loss because of introduction of GST law in specific. तो GST लॉ आने के वजह से जिन जिन स्टेट्स का नुकसान हुआ है उनको पैसा भर के देने के लिए we have this act called as the GST compensation cess act. Is it clear to all of you? I hope that you are understanding. Yeah. Now we will go further. Let's see the next part of it. अभी ये एकदम fundamental points, like I told you today being the first lecture of this series, I will be covering a bit fundamental, so I understand that थोड़ा final के students को या repeat inter वाले students को शायद थोड़ा सा ये engaging नहीं लगेगा, because I know that you guys are very much aware of all this, but please, like I said, that I want to genuinely complete a series for entire, like all the set of students, whomsoever they watch, whenever they watch, they should be able to understand this. That's why this specific lecture is covering, and because it's a first lecture, so there is a specific reason behind this, so kindly do not mind for this. Okay, now friends, as far as the basics of indirect taxes is concerned, we have discussed the very prime parts of it. Now when we come to the goods and services tax, now the date when the goods and service tax was brought into force was 1st of July 2017. Although this draft GST law was introduced back in 2007, then it was debated, discussed, deliberated. 2006 से उसका in fact paper discussions चालू था, white paper discussions चालू था, draft discussions चालू था. But then there were so many changes which were required to be made because it was such a big paradigm shift कि इतने सारे indirect taxes को merge करके एक common tax create करना, that in itself was a big thing to make, and therefore this time was required. Now friends, when you say the levy of tax, we said that okay, for the purpose of levy, the taxable event is very essential. So unless the taxable event of supply takes place, there will be no GST which can ever be levied. So if there is no supply, there is no GST. Now also understand in some such cases that in case of no supply, yes, in case of no supply, there is no levy of GST. But in case of deemed supply मतलब क्या? Where there is a fiction created by the law. मतलब actual position में there is no supply, but there is a deeming fiction. मतलब law कभी-कभी हमें कुछ positions assume करने बोलता है, because it has the power fundamentally available with it. So in case of deemed supply, yes, there is a levy of GST. So हम लोग ये डीम्ड सप्लाई में कौन से शेड्यूल 1 में वो डीम्ड सप्लाई कवर होता है वगैरह, we'll come to that when we study deemed supply, but just fundamental points. Generally what we are going to say, if there is no supply, there is no GST. But sometimes there may not be a direct supply, but there is a deemed supply. And in case of deemed supply, if yes, there is a GST levy that will be possible. So this is a fine thin discussion between the actual supply and the deemed supply, and what is the impact which is on it. Okay, what is the impact which is on it? This is what we are trying to understand. Okay, right. Now, friends, we'll just try to move further apart. Now, the further part of it is that when we are going to discuss how we will be discussing this, very simply, I'll put it across that when we are going to discuss the any aspects of the taxes or any aspects of this GST law, I'll be referring to the notes. As I said that I will request those who are interested in having these notes, PDF file of the notes. It's my earnest request that kindly send me a email or a message and I can send you the PDF copy of it with a very complete belief that you are not going to circulate it unnecessarily here and there. And even if you circulate, that's completely fine. मुझे कोई तकलीफ नहीं है उस चीज की, but let it be relevant to those who are really studying and understanding. नहीं तो उन्हें in isolation शायद कुछ ना समझे. Now, as I said that I'm going to consider the bare text of the law, but I will ensure that you are not going to get bored with the bare text of the law. हम each and every section को ऐसी इस तरीके से पढ़ेंगे that we are going to discuss the practical side of it, not the theory side of it, because this law can be understood the best when you are dealing it with practically. Thankfully, my practice orients a lot in indirect taxes, and therefore I am rather blessed that I keep on getting some examples and illustrations which are of a real-time nature, which are helpful for me to deal with the provisions of the law. Okay, so let's try and understand this. Now, what is the scope of supply? And so, like I said, that we emphasized a lot on what this supply means and so and so. Friends, थोड़ा सा ये समझ लेते हैं that when we say that okay, there is one single word जिसके ऊपर पूरा GST अगर लेवी होने वाला है, तो इसका मतलब ये वर्ड का कुछ तो अहमियत बहुत ज्यादा है. Like this word supply has been given some extremely high graded, high value meaning, and therefore we are really supposed to understand that what we really mean by this word supply. Now, if you see the scope of supply, okay, we are going to just take up one extract of this section 7 subsection 1 of the CGST Act. इसको हम लोग लेके whiteboard पे जाते हैं and we are going to discuss over there. Now, what does this particular provision of section 7 of CGST Act? Now, understand, all the provisions that we are going to discuss right now will only be of the CGST Act. In the CA intermediate or CA final examination, no question from any state goods and service tax laws are asked, because SGST laws are not required to be known by you. They are state oriented laws. So हम लोग एक ही एग्जाम देते हैं पैन इंडिया बेसिस पे, इसलिए we do not get any SGST based questions. Like there will be no question from any state goods and service tax law per se. All the laws and all the sections that we are going to discuss from CGST Act and IGST Act only, and to the extent possible, maybe at required UTGST and compensation cess for CA final students, intermediate students के लिए तो वो भी नहीं. So, as far as the supply is considered, let us try to understand. Now, Section 7 subsection 1 says that for the purpose of this act, the expression supply includes. Now, as I said, the meaning given to this word is an inclusive meaning. The meaning given to this word is a inclusive meaning. Means, आज के तारीख में these many sale, transfer, exchange, rental, license, rental, disposal, etc. ये चीजें इन्होंने बताई है illustrative basis पे. As on today, it says that supply of goods or services or both by sale, exchange, transfer वगैरह वगैरह. Tomorrow इसमें कोई और words भी add हो सकते हैं. As on today, as of now, it is only in the form of a, what you can say is inclusive meaning which has been given. There are some friends on YouTube who have joined in late, so मैंने उनके लिए भी link अभी वापस एक बार Zoom link दे दिया है. So those who are going to join on a regular basis, I'll ensure that I'll keep on giving the Zoom link every time when we start it, so that you reach out of the Zoom at the earliest possible. Okay. Now, friends, let's see. Now, supply means, and I mean, for the purpose of this act, the expression supply includes. Now, supply includes what all things? First, all forms of supply of goods or services or both. All forms of supply of goods or services or both. Means we have now a common law for dealing with goods and services. Now you may say that sir इसमें ना समझने वाली क्या बात है, like why are you explaining all this that इसमें common law? So बता दो, सब्र करो. Reason being, in the pre-GST regime, there was a service tax which was governed by the provisions of Finance Act 1994 as amended from time to time, which was specifically dealing with services. There was a Central Excise Act which was specifically dealing with the manufacture of goods. There was a state VAT law which was specifically dealing with the intrastate sale of goods. There was a CST Act which was dealing with the interstate sale of goods. So friends, why I'm saying that there is a common law, there is a purpose behind saying that there is a common law for goods and services, because GST law envisages goods and services both under its ambit. So for the purpose of this act, the expression supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, license, exchange, rental, lease, disposal. Now, which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration and in the course of the business. We'll go to that, but we'll first try to understand ये दोनों पार्ट हम लोग बाद में समझते हैं. Let us first try to understand the very basic point of it. That all forms of supply means and includes. So ये section particularly हमको क्या बोल रहा है that whenever you will deal with the GST law, that GST law will be talking about the levy of tax on a transaction called as supply. Levy of tax will be on a transaction called as supply, and supply will be of what? Supply can be of goods also, supply can be of services also. Now, first they are talking that supply, all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale. Now, what do you mean by supply by way of sale? Now, sale में मैं दो पॉइंट से बात कर सकता हूं इसके ऊपर. Like we'll first talk about what is a sale of goods. Okay, we'll first talk about what is the sale of goods. Now, this is very common, and everybody of you must be aware that when I say sale of goods, sale of goods mein, what is the primary point that is going to happen? That sale of goods means where there is a transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer. When there is a transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer, we say that there is going to be a sale of goods. Simple. Now, under the GST law, example of sale of goods, क्या example हो सकता है? Okay, let's say that Lucky Shoppe has sold iPhone 14 to Mr. Weber. Lucky Shoppe has sold iPhone 14 to one Mr. Weber. Okay. Now here what is happening? Let us see what is happening. यहाँ पे there is a sale of goods. Sale of goods of what? What is the goods over here? So iPhone is the goods. Okay. Where there is a transfer of ownership from seller to the buyer. Who is the seller over here? This Lucky Shop is the seller. Who is a buyer? यहाँ पे this Mr. Weber is the buyer. So by virtue of this, we say that sale of goods is a particular transaction which comes under the scope of supply. हम लोग फिलहाल ये समझ रहे हैं कि okay, supply के ऊपर अगर GST लगता है तो supply में क्या क्या आता है? So first thing that comes under supply is sale, and in that also we have first seen what is a sale. Okay, sale of goods के बारे में बात करते हैं तो sale of goods में where there is a transfer of ownership from seller to the buyer. Now we'll go to the second part of it. What is the second part of it? Sale of services. Sale of services. Now, what is sale of services over here? Let's say that Airtel Airtel has agreed to provide. Airtel has agreed to provide telecom services to Priya. Now here, simple. What Airtel is doing, they have agreed to provide telephone services, telecom services to Priya. So यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? That there is a sale of service. Who is the supplier of service over here? The supplier of service is Airtel. किसको सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड किया? तो वन मिस प्रिया, दे हैव प्रोवाइडेड दिस सर्विसेज. क्या चीज का सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं? टेलीकॉम सर्विस. नाउ सी, अनलाइक इन गुड्स देयर इज अ ट्रांसफर ऑफ ओनरशिप. सर्विसेज में ट्रांसफर ऑफ ओनरशिप ऐसा नहीं होता. सर्विसेज में देयर विल ऑलवेज बी अ प्रोविजन ऑफ सर्विस. देयर विल बी एन एग्रीमेंट टू प्रोवाइड द सर्विसेज. So friends, in this case, particularly remember that when you talk about sale as a matter of supply, sale will only be, I mean, sale can be of goods also, sale can be of services also. When I say sale of goods, there is going to be a transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer. When I say sale of services, there will be a agreement to provide services, which is provided, I mean, that services are provided by the service provider to the service recipient for a consideration. Now, of course, ये जो आगे का part है for a consideration, we have not yet dealt with it. We are going to deal with it slowly, steadily. Don't worry. Okay. Now, we'll go further. Now, when I say that there is a supply of services, or there is a supply of goods and there is a supply of services, I need to take into consideration the next part of it. That इसको ऐसा पढ़ते हैं, all forms of supply by way of sale. So let's say that supply means sale. Okay, now I'm only going to read it limited. Supply means sale. बाकी का सब words फिलहाल छोड़ दो. Which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. So ये दो transactions को अभी हम लोग आगे का part में ऐसा पढ़ते हैं. So now I'm just going to break up the definition. I mean, break up this transaction or other break up section 7(1)(a) in such a part that logically हमको ये समझ लेना है. That supply by way of sale, supply by way of sale can be of what? It can be of goods or it can be of services. Now we'll take the next part of it, which is made or agreed for a consideration by a person in course or furtherance of business. फिलहाल हम लोग उसमें क्या कर रहे हैं? That we are just carving out the relevant portion for our discussion as of now. Supply by way of sale, by way of, I mean, it can be of goods or services, which is made or agreed to be made by for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. So friends, यहाँ पे हम लोग क्या बात कर रहे हैं? That when we say that this is supply by ऑफ सेल. अभी ये गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज के बारे में सेल कैसे हो सकता है वो तो हमने ये दोनों एग्जांपल्स में देख लिया, राइट? व्हाट यू मीन बाय सेल वी आर ऑलरेडी अवेयर. नाउ व्हिच इज मेड और अग्रीड टू बी मेड, व्हिच इज मेड और अग्रीड टू बी मेड मींस द ट्रांजैक्शन माइट हैव हैपेंड नाउ और द ट्रांजैक्शन माइट बी गोइंग टू हैपन इन फ्यूचर. स्पेशली इन केस ऑफ गुड्स सर्विसेज you will always see that okay there might be some agreements which are reached जो आगे जाके होने वाला है. मतलब मान के चलो आज आपने कोई टूर एंड ट्रैवल कंपनी के साथ सितंबर मंथ के लिए से लद्दाख का बुकिंग कर लिया. So you have agreed that company has agreed to take you to Ladakh in September. So it is just an agreement today. It is not a service provided today. Correct? So made or agreed to be made for a consideration. Now what do you mean by consideration? Consideration का meaning होता है. Consideration का meaning होता है. Yes. What do you mean by consideration? The meaning of word consideration is something in return. In the contract act that you must have studied, it is also having a Latin mechanism, I mean Latin verse called as quid pro quo, something in return. Now see, consideration may be monetary consideration, non-monetary consideration. As long as you are happy to settle your transaction on that basis, it can be called as consideration. Now this transaction of sale of goods. So now try to understand. हम लोग ने क्या किया? Scope of supply में से सिर्फ एक transaction आज हम बात करने वाले हैं, that is sale. Sale can be of goods or sale can be of services. Sale of goods or services which is made or agreed to be made. Maybe the transaction is happening today or it is agreed to be done in future for a consideration, for something in return by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Means what is most important is that course or furtherance of business ka meaning hota hai that when you are doing or undertaking a transaction with an intention of doing a business in that transaction, means it is done for a non-gratuitous basis. It is done for a business intent, business recovery basis. ऐसे टाइम पे उस ट्रांजैक्शन को हम लोग बोलते हैं that okay, it is a transaction for this transaction for furtherance of business. So now let's say in this particular case हम लोग ने उस टाइम पे ये बोला कि Lucky Shopee has sold an iPhone 14 to Mr. Vaibhav. Let's say iPhone 14 to Mr. Vaibhav for, let's say, okay, over here for rupees 1 lakh. For rupees 1 lakh. So वैभव को क्या मिला? 1 लाख रुपए देके तो आईफोन मिला. एंड लकी शॉप वाले को आईफोन बेच के क्या मिला? तो उसको 1 लाख रुपए मिला. So that becomes a consideration. Likewise, Airtel has agreed to provide services to telecom service to Priya for a monthly charge of rupees, let's say 600 per month. It is the monthly charge. So Priya getting telecom service is her consideration. Priya giving 600 rupees is a consideration for Airtel. So agreeing a supply or by way of sale for a consideration. Now Lucky Shop ने मोबाइल का दुकान खोला ही क्यों है? तो बिजनेस करने के लिए. So obviously it is doing it for the furtherance of business. Likewise Airtel भी अपने services क्यों provide कर रहा है? For furtherance of business. So friends, what this is trying to say that okay, there might be some transactions जहाँ पे एक तो probably consideration ही नहीं है या consideration है पर वो it is not in a monetary form and it is not done in the furtherance of business. So for instance, you going to a restaurant to have food. So आप जाके खाना खाते हो, आप उनको पैसा देते हो, वो आपको खाना देते हैं. It's a supply. You tell your family members to cook food for you and they'll serve food to you. Now here consideration is missing, furtherance of business is missing because it is for personal intention, personal nature transaction. So there, even though there is a supply, there will be no furtherance of business. Say there will be no furtherance of business, there will be no consideration. So it will not fulfill the criteria of being a supply as per the section 7 subsection 1. So friends, today what all we have discussed, just very basic parts of what you mean by indirect tax. Then we came to some how GST was brought into picture. So pre-GST regime में क्या था and GST regime में क्या है. Then we have just discussed the different taxes under GST, CGST, SGST, IGST, UTGST, so on. Then स्कोप ऑफ सप्लाई सेक्शन का सिर्फ एक स्मॉल एलिमेंट हमने आज कवर किया है, दैट व्हाट यू मीन बाय सप्लाई. उसमें से सिर्फ सेल के बारे में आज हमने डिस्कशन किया है. सो सेल कैन बी कंसिडर्ड एज सप्लाई. सप्लाई के बेसिस पे मतलब सेल के बेसिस में भी इट कैन बी फॉर गुड्स, इट कैन बी फॉर सर्विसेज, that will be for a consideration and that can be in the furtherance of business. So friends, today's lecture which was very more basic oriented, from tomorrow's lecture onwards we are going to directly start with these. Those who have subscribed to the YouTube channel, anyways you're going to get a heads up when there will be a new video uploaded. So अगर मैं lecture के time पे आप हाजिर नहीं भी हो तो भी आप ये lecture कभी भी देख सकते हो as per your leisure. Those who are in their study leave for the November 23 attempt, my advice to you is दैट एटलीस्ट ये 1 घंटे का लेक्चर आइदर मेरे साथ देख लो लाइव, या फिर आप लाइव नहीं आ पा रहे हो तो 1 घंटे का लेक्चर देखो. उतना पढ़ाई उस दिन के लिए कर लो, उतने कोई इसके ऊपर के जो भी क्वेश्चन आंसर्स है maybe that you can see from your study material so that your revision is done along with the lecture only. All right, so friends, for today today's lecture we are here stopping for today's lecture. All this is going to be available on the YouTube channel, so that will be very much available at your disposal. So for the while, I would like to sign off. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye. Take care and Jai Hind.